Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is David Baghdassarian. I'm a corporate partner in the Charlotte office of K&L Gates and co-chair of the Disability Inclusion Task Force. On behalf of the Firm-Wide Diversity Committee, welcome to our 16th speaker in our series of conversations about race and diversity. And on behalf of the entire K&L Gates community, we also welcome our clients who have joined us today for this very important conversation. The firm launched a firm-wide speaker series in June 2020 in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd to have conversations focused on the effects of systemic racism in our society as part of our pledge to listen, be educated, take action, and work together to build a more equitable and inclusive society. We have heard from numerous distinguished speakers through this program, including the Honorable Tony Coelho, a six-term congressman from California and primary author and sponsor of the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, otherwise known as the ADA. Jill Houghton, President and CEO of Disability Inn. Reverend James M. Lawson Jr., civil rights leader, revered teacher, and mentor to Martin Luther King. Kevin Jennings, CEO of Lambda Legal, who discussed America's fight for LGBTQ plus equality, and Professor Raquel Aldana, a law professor at UC Davis School of Law. In celebration of International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which falls on December 3 each year, it is my pleasure to welcome our guest, Jenny Lay-Flurrie, Vice President and Chief Accessibility Officer at Microsoft. And now I'll turn the stage over to my co-chair of the Disability Inclusion Task Force, Craig Leen.
David, such a pleasure to be here today. You know, this is a really special program. I'm so glad so many people are joining us from around the world. Very exciting. Also for our Disability Inclusion Task Force, which anyone at the firm can join. So please think about joining. We have two of our members who are actually presenting today. Well, Jenny's presenting, but are in a sort of a fireside chat and moderating the discussion today. And that's Michael Ruck, who's a partner in our London office in the Investigations, Enforcement, and White Collar Practice Group on our Disability Inclusion Task Force, a very vital member and helping lead our European and London office efforts. We also have Louise Bond, Senior Associate in the London office, also in our Disability Inclusion Task Force. And these two have been leaders in the firm in the disability inclusion area. And so it's exciting to have them moderate today. We also have, for those watching, you'll see there's an ASL interpreter. That's so important, such an important part about inclusion. Her name's Mary Sulzer. Mary, thank you for being here today. And then our grand guest. This is a very special moment for me because I've been involved in the disability inclusion effort for a number of years because of my daughter, who's profoundly autistic, and I got involved in the autism movement in Coral Gables and the inclusion movement. And then, as you all know, I also self-identify as having a disability and being neurodivergent myself. And I was the OFCCP director where I worked. One of the things that we did was enforce Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act. And through that, I got to know Jenny Lay-Flurrie. And in fact, in many ways, I view her as a role model for me and the advocacy I'm trying to do. She is a true superstar. She's very modest. So I'm sorry, Jenny, for saying this, but I want everyone to know she's a true superstar in the disability inclusion area, in the civil rights area, in the accessibility area. We're very lucky to have her here today. She is the Chief Accessibility Officer of Microsoft. She helped pioneer that office for many other companies across the United States. I have a dream that one day there'll be a Chief Accessibility Officer of the United States. They have one in Canada, who Jenny knows and we've spoken to together. Jenny, as the Chief Accessibility Officer of Microsoft, is such a leader in terms of accessibility in the workplace, neurodiversity in the workplace, affinity groups, employee resource groups in the workplace. The idea that people with disabilities should be fully included in all aspects of the workplace. And not only is she the Chief Accessibility Officer for Employment, but you're going to find out today that she also is very involved in all of the accessibility features, projects, initiatives that Microsoft is doing for its customers as well. So she's helping all of us because all of us use Microsoft. So this is a very exciting day. Jenny, thank you for being here today with us. I should say one other thing. Jenny also is the past chair of Disability In. I've been very involved with Disability In. Our firm is very involved with Disability In. We were recently, I don't know, Jenny, if you know, I think you do know this because you're the past chair, but we were listed, we received the recognition for being one of the best places to work for disability inclusion from Disability In. We're very involved with Disability In. So we have the connection with you through Microsoft, but also Disability In. So this is a double treat for us today. Jenny, let me turn it to you and let me turn it to our moderators. Thank you again for being here. It is a true honor and pleasure for us.
I just want to say thank you to Craig. I don't, my good Craig, can you come with me to every single thing that I do going forward?
It'd be an honor. I'd love to, if you wish.
Good grief. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Sorry, please go ahead.
That's all good. One day Craig will introduce me like that. It'd be fantastic. But thanks, Jenny. Thanks for joining us today. It's fantastic to have you with us. We're obviously going to have a chat with you about various things, but kind of starting off, we wondered if, to the extent that you're comfortable to do so, if you could share some of your personal experiences growing up as a deaf and disabled person, including any insight you have in relation to the impact on the wider deaf community.
Yeah, so I grew up in the middle of England near Birmingham. My parents both teachers. I was born, they think, with hearing, but got measles, and measles caused me to develop hearing loss, and a lot of other things happen as a small kid. My sister born with hearing loss, my uncle deaf. I mean, I think it's just part of our family, and so I grew up very much empowered by my parents to get after whatever I wanted to do. I went to a traditional school, learned to self-advocate, which I think is incredibly important. But I also learned to hide it. And being different wasn't something I was comfortable with as a teenager. But I did go on to music school, and that's where I think everything kind of hit ahead. I again pursued my passion. I wanted to be a classical clarinetist at the time, until I learned that I wasn't as good enough to be a classical clarinetist. But I learned in music school really the importance of how to hide it, but also how self-destructive that was. And so coming out and moving into the workplace, my first job was in London at the Daily Mirror, working on an IT help desk. I really did learn at that point, the importance of being included in the deaf community, and owning my deafness as part of my identity, which I think has been very important because as we age, we get more disabilities. It's kind of correlated with age. That's how it goes. So deafness is now one of my gang. And with each time you come into this journey, right, accident and injury is where most people develop disability. You have to go through that identity journey that goes with it.
Yeah. We also understand that you are on the board of, I'm going to mispronounce this, I'm sure, Gallaudet University in DC. And just wondered in terms of that role as well, kind of thinking about possibly the misperceptions or the challenges that some of those students face, kind of how you've seen that develop and kind of how you've seen them develop as well.
Yeah, Gallaudet University is, being on the board, I actually finished my term there. Probably one of the proudest things I've done in my career. Gallaudet is the only university in the world that is dedicated to deaf individuals who use sign as their first language. So it is all signing. There's not a lot of voice. You actually switch your voice off when you walk in. It has around 1,400 students, based in DC. And I think, what I really learned is if you flip the rhetoric and you flip the bed a little bit, we are used to a world where we use voice as our first language. And there is something that is incredibly different when you flip that. And actually, if you walk in as a hearing person and you use your voice, you have to really adapt yourself to a non-voice sign world. And it's very different. It puts a hearing person in the position of being the person that is having to accommodate themselves. So I learned a huge amount in my time there. There are very simple things that Gallaudet does that makes it the most inclusive university for the deaf. Actually, when you walk in the buildings, all of the walls are gone. So deaf people can see it. They call it deaf space. So you can see. I actually came back and renovated my house because I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. I can now see everything. And so I'm not just saying, hey, does anyone want a cup of tea? And then waiting till they come to me, because that's how it goes in my house. I can now see when they say yes. And it stopped a lot of frustration with my family, because I'm always throwing out stuff with my voice, but I can't hear their reply. If they want something, they'll come my way. It's my theory. So yes, I learned a huge amount, and it's a profoundly important institution, I think, in American society.
You mentioned how it changed kind of your home, obviously. I wonder how kind of it impacted your approach both professionally, so in the leadership role that you've got as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, the role I have today, it's definitely influenced what I do. That and the other, boards that I'm a part of, I think I pulled something from every single one of them. The role I have today, I've been in for the last 8 years, 20 years, just coming up at Microsoft. Not the role I thought I would have, being a kid going to a music college. And really, if you look at what I do in this role, I think it's been really important to pull a lot of perspective from people with disability. I have my own, but that doesn't mean that I know everyone out there. You have to listen, you have to learn, you have to constantly be very curious to understand the lived experience of disability. And so I'm on the board with an organization called Team Gleason that works on technology for people with ALS or MND. And so people going through really one of the worst diseases out there, and how we can help with technology. So spending a lot of time with folks with very profound disabilities. Disability which is a corporate board that works on inclusion of people with disabilities within organizations, which I adore. I've been on that board, my goodness, 10 years or more. Gallaudet, and I work with others as well. So yes, you pull something from every single one of them, I think. But you've got to be insatiably curious in these roles.
Yeah. And how do you think your role as Chief Accessibility Officer has kind of developed? And are you seeing similar developments of that role in other industries, in other organizations?
How have I seen it develop and improve? Today, I think you have to be constantly listening and learning. If I maybe boil back in my journey into this role, and then what we've done with this role and this office, when I came to Microsoft, I came to work on Hotmail. If anyone remembers that, this is where I reveal my age, probably. Hotmail being MSN. That's why I came to Microsoft. And in fact, what I didn't identify on my interviews, this is 20 years ago, as being deaf, one of the main reasons that I was very excited to come to Microsoft was because MSN at the time was one of the first companies to really trial video messaging. And video messaging for me as a deaf person, with my family being all over around the world, really important. And so it gives me just the best conversations with my dad and my sister and my mom. But what I didn't expect was that I would need to self-ID very quickly. I ended up joining the deaf community, joining the disability ERG, kind of the community that you guys are running for K&L Gates. And so that led me down the path of accessibility, ultimately becoming the CAO 8 years ago. And I made a very purposeful shift when I came into this role. I think a lot of accessibility roles like mine, there aren't enough of them. I think Craig beautifully shared that. And most of them within organizations are about compliance of a technical infrastructure or a physical environment. So making technology like this accessible, making your buildings accessible to the bar of compliance. And that's a very important function. But actually, the best way to do it is to think about it more cohesively as a flywheel or an ecosystem where you lean on people with disabilities and you grow your density of disabled talent and you empower that talent, you listen and you're curious about that talent and you pull that into what you do with your buildings and technology, and you raise the bar above compliance. And you know, the goal should never be to make something compliant. That just means you've hit the bare minimum. In many countries, that doesn't even mean that you can get in the front door. That just means that they've gone down the back alley past the garbage trucks, and you may have found a widgy exit at the back. That is no way to treat disabled talent. So by kind of creating that flywheel, for us, what we've done is lighten the load on ourselves to make things compliant, but we've also taken it further to really focus on good experiences, usable, productive, efficient. And I think that's where I'm seeing the industry now starting to shift, albeit with a lot more to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose as part of that journey, what do you think have been maybe the key moments in terms of your advocating for accessibility and inclusion?
Key moments for me. That's a great question. Well, I think every single thing that we do, as we push the bar further higher, and I really do think we have to if we just look at social statistics. The unemployment, employment, underemployment rates, I think, are well known for disability. They're chronic. If we look at voting, we've also got some issues. If we look at healthcare, we've got, so one is, I think, one of the key things, I think, for my role was to understand that, yes, I'm a nerd. I work in a tech company, but we have the power, as does everyone, to deliver fundamental societal change. And if you stay very grounded to that, I think that changes the lens of what you do. So I think one of the very profound moments for me was just creating the mission. The mission at Microsoft and accessibility is intertwined. It's empowering every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. I love that. I think that was a really big moment, and that was coming in as I came into this role. I think launching certain employment programs was a very significant role for us. We have a lot of general hiring that we do, and we've had to adapt and grow and change some of our hiring processes to be more inclusive of disability. But at the same time, we also have some very specific open doors for some sections of the disabled community. So think about intellectual developmental disabilities. We've had a hiring program there since 2013. Our autism hiring, which is now expanded to all of neurodiversity, that started in 2015. It's coming up on its 10th anniversary next year. Those hiring programs are very important to us. And really the onus was on us. We were slamming the door shut on this talent pool, and we had to change how we think about hiring and open the door. So this was bad on us, that we weren't allowing disabled talent to come in. I think we've had an incredible motion with some of our events. In fact, this year coming up in March will be the 15th anniversary of the Ability Summit, which is the one event that I run every year. That event last year had, 18,000 attendees. So if people think that disability is niche, you're wrong. It is huge and global. We had 130 countries attending that last year. No pressure, by the way. We always like think with the weight of pulling that one off, because it's not just the content and the speakers, it's also for us a great way to really push forward the best practice in how to create inclusive and accessible events. And then I think, I have to mention something technical. Again, yes, talking to someone who works at Microsoft, and I am full-blown nerd. I think from accessibility, I think there's two really big moments for me. I think one is the innovation that we've seen from our employees. So seeing the effect of all of this fundamental work and a lot more, seeing then what comes out of our disabled employees is just incredibly important. Some of the most important things in Windows have come from, I can pinpoint them back to our employees. Live captions, which is just right next to Wi-Fi, you'll see the accessibility setting in Windows 11. Live captions, online, offline, you don't need connectivity. That was created by one of our deaf engineers. Hand raise in Teams, that was created by a neurodiverse engineer. Seeing AI, created by some members of our blind community. So just very important employee. And then of course, AI. I think AI is going to be probably the most important technology of our time on many sectors to build the AI economy, but also I think it's going to lower the bar for people to be able to use accessibility. A lot of AI is by nature accessibility tools.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so many more. But it's always about the people who are doing the things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Jenny. Louise, I know you had some questions as well, so I'm conscious I've asked quite a few.
Yeah, hi Jenny. Thank you so much for speaking to us today. I'm actually going to pick up on something you mentioned earlier about how important it is that when we're tackling accessibility policies, we are doing that beyond just reaching the standard of compliance. And hopefully that's a viewpoint that people are increasingly coming around to and most people agree with. But if there's a few people who are wondering why they should be doing that, why do you believe that accessibility should be seen as more than just a compliance issue?
Well, accessibility is a fundamental right. And, I think we all need to breathe that in. It's a fundamental right to be able to access society. And the blunt reality is that this world has not been designed for us. When we go back into the centuries and decades of how we as a human race have designed this beautiful place, we firstly created stairs. Stairs are inherently not accessible. We have created environments. In fact, only 4% of the world's websites today are accessible. So we've systematically, over time, created infrastructures that are simply not accessible for people, which means that you've then got a section of society that is huge, 1.3 billion. I'd say at Microsoft, 9% of my community here have already said yes, they have a disability. True numbers, likely more in the high teens to 20s. We're seeing that within some corporations. That's huge. Neurodiversity on its own, the biggest growing segment at this time, is enormous. Our own community is already 5,000 strong, and will likely be significantly higher. So this is dense, and yet infrastructure, we haven't systematically built it right. We haven't built it with the inclusive design that it needs. So accessibility is all about remediating that. It's about bridging it. Now, my grand schemey plan, if I had a magic wand, I'd go back and I'd redesign a little bit. And I would wave some pixie dust and fix a few things. And again, I do believe that there's some technologies in the pipeline that will help us to do that. But in the meantime, I think what we have to bear in mind is that this isn't an optional enterprise. This is about making sure that we as employees, as members of society, can access fundamental services.
I think that's really important, and I would hope that we're getting to the stage where the importance and value of that is recognised more widely. Before we get round to fixing things, it's probably very important that there's a shift in education, awareness and understanding. And we've built the world poorly, but hopefully we're improving things. Do you think that there has been an increase in education, support for and representation of the disabled community in recent years?
I think we've seen, and I'd be curious what you're finding. I mean, I can share my little bit. I'm kind of like dying to know what you all are seeing, and Craig, what you're seeing. I think I've definitely seen some consistent improvements and developments in growth of communities, in strength of voice, in fundamental ways that have really driven some change. I think the mental health community went through that during the pandemic. I think the neurodiversity community, as my light goes out, and I'll put that back on, the neurodiversity community is in that moment now. And over the time, I mean, even yesterday, the Department of Transport issued its final rulings on air travel. 1,000 wheelchairs are destroyed or damaged every month in air travel. And so it's great to see movements like that, which matter to employees. We actually wrote a white paper on that one with an incredible organization of human rights management, just to illustrate the impact of air travel on employers. You know, many of my team here use chairs, power and manual, and have to go through that process on traveling. And so, yes, I do think that there's something really important that we have to do here. I think it's improving. Do I think it's enough? No, I think, you know, I kind of linger back to sort of Craig's opening comments. We do not have enough roles like mine that exist. Often I see accessibility taken to the bar of compliance and not beyond, and not infusing the insights of people with disabled people into those processes. All of those are opportunities for us to lean in and do more, with the potential to impact healthcare, education, university systems and the workplace, and far more. So yes, I think it's a joint responsibility we have.
And hopefully we will come on to what more we could and should be doing later on in our conversation. Thinking about the increase in education and awareness, what do you think the role of popular culture is and representation in popular culture? And do you think that that's helpful? And do you think that it's been helpful having sort of more representation in recent popular culture? I'm thinking about television programs, movies, increasingly trying to fill that gap.
Well, I'll say Sunday morning, or actually no, it was Saturday, my phone blew up because of a gorgeous program in the UK, Strictly Dancing, and you know, the fact that the winner of the UK, not to give away the plot, I think it's well known at this point for anyone who's catching up on episodes, was won by a blind comedian. And in the finalists was a deaf dancer as well. You know, I think that matters. I think what Chris said, the winner of Strictly in the UK is, and forgive me, I won't get the quote exactly right. I would urge you to watch his acceptance. Is for anyone who's told you that you cannot, let me show you what you can. And it was a very, very powerful dance. My dad was like, you must watch this now. And I do think those things matter, because I think there is social stigma. There are social stereotypes that exist. When I walk in a room as a deaf person, and I'm clearly vocal, far too much vocal sometimes, but I walk in the room often with my sign language interpreter. A lot of people turn to my interpreter and say, hey, would she like a glass of water? What does she want to, where does she want to sit? And I'm like, hold up, stop. talk to me. Mary, as you can tell, is amazing, but talk to me. There's no she in this room. Just talk right at me. When you see a person with a wheelchair, with a care assistant, talk to the person with the wheelchair, not the care assistant, gorgeous though they may be. Talk person to person. When you see a person who is neurodiverse, ask what you can do to help. Ask is probably the first thing that we say anyone can do. If you see someone with us, just give a little bit of extra time. It's not going to hurt you. In fact, that's partly one of the biggest things we've done with our interview process is give a little bit of extra time for that cognitive load and that deep rest. So do I think it's important? Yes, I think media does influence, and representation is very, very, very crucial. But also, these people are not in their jobs because they're disabled. I'm not in my job because I'm deaf and disabled. I'm in my job because I'm good at what I do. I have skills. Chris won because he was a good dancer. And he illustrated to the UK what that means. So just be careful of leaning on it. None of these people are in their roles or in their are acting in films and movies and TV because of any tokenism. They're there because they are brilliant actors.
Absolutely, and I'm sure anyone joining us from the UK will really enjoy that Strictly shout out, and hopefully they've already watched the final, although if they haven't by a Tuesday evening, I think that's their fault. I think Michael has some questions about sort of more global outlook now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that increased awareness is definitely kind of becoming more significant. So, for example, I received an email today from an airline about a new kind of plane with a new cabin and thing, and it had 10 key points in it about that cabin, one of which was that it is more accessible in a wheelchair. It's been specifically designed to enable wheelchair users to have that greater accessibility. And I think certainly as a kind of a parent of a neurodiverse child in the UK, it's picking up on something you said, Jenny, earlier on. We've seen a shift, I think, or an expansion of, I suppose, legislation, but also awareness. So moving, not just looking at individuals with physical disabilities, but also looking at those who are neurodiverse as well, and looking at their accessibility. And I wondered if that's something you'd seen in the various territories in which Microsoft operates, being a global company.
Yes, not quickly enough. But yes, I think we are seeing it. I think, and when I say not quickly enough, I think that neurodiversity, which is, an umbrella term for lots of different cognitive disabilities, only really came around in 2015. It was hotly debated for a few years. It's only really been adopted in the last couple of years. I think cognitive disabilities you will see on a lot of rules and legislation and regulation. Will you see that neurodiversity? Not quite yet, but I think it's moving quickly. And I do think that we're going to have to get in front of that. In fact, one of the biggest areas where we're seeing AI have impact right now is neurodiversity. And it's EY actually just produced a report that we partnered with them on to look at the impact of AI on neurodiversity. And over 90% said that it was completely empowering to them as neurodiverse individuals. And why is that? Because AI is about consuming huge, think Hogwarts library, Gringotts, just think about insane amounts of data and summarizing it into very short specifics. So it is about this enormous library, like you can't see the ceiling library, and taking it down to itty bitty packages. Or it's about reviewing a document and not just looking at a spell check, but looking at the semantic meaning in that document and quickly giving you the edits. So if you're dyslexic, if you have ADD, if you have autism, suddenly you've got these set of tools that are helping you to manage your bandwidth, to tackle things that you may procrastinate over or have anxiety over and get them done really super quickly. That is happening naturally as a result, which we see with often technologies, right? We see a natural evolution of talking books being created for the blind, gosh, over a century ago. Now you look at Audible. We're seeing how AI tools are coming out and having immediate impact in this space. And so I think we are going to have to put our arms around that holistically to make sure that we keep those positive benefits as we go forward. We don't restrict the innovation and potentially remove that, but we also support this and learn from it and provide the right rules to make sure it continues. So it's a careful balance in all the things. But yes, I do think mental health and neurodiversity, very top of mind for me in how we go forward.
Yeah. I just wondered, in terms of, I suppose, just looking at kind of the global picture, I guess, kind of how you deal with, as an organization, primarily, how you deal with jurisdictional and cultural differences and some of the hurdles that those raise.
Yeah, I mean, disability is viewed differently, region by region, country by country. For Microsoft, accessibility training is mandatory. And what I mean by that is every employee has to take, in fact, it's brand new training that we put out there. Every employee has to take a 20, 30-minute virtual training on disability and accessibility. And so what we do right out the bat with everyone, and we're putting 238,000 through that right now, is we level set on how we view disability, the language, the etiquette, the tools that are available to you, how to get support, accommodations. We've made accommodations, of course, central. We've also put an SLA on those. So if you need an accommodation, we turn it around super fast. And so for me, I think one of the things we do as a company is we create that sort of cultural norms, and we level set on that across countries. So even if disability is not viewed in the way we would view it in the UK or the US, we're able to adopt, really, we're leaning on World Health Organization and other definitions. We adopt a global view on how to see disability as a Microsoft employee, as a company. That's been hugely beneficial to us, because it means I'm not having basic conversations of, no, we need to make the front door accessible. And here's why. You all took the training. I don't have to explain. So it's kind of raised the bench for us. And yeah, we've made that training and sort of 2.5 hours of other training we provided our employees. We made that all available to customers as well. So yeah, anyone is free to take that. It's all on my LinkedIn if anyone wants to check it out. Just grab it, steal it, edit it, whatever's useful to you. We've removed all the Microsoft jargon from it. But yes, I do think that skilling is actually a very important piece of that journey.
Thanks. Louise, I think you had a couple of questions as well, kind of linked in.
Yeah, I think some people listening to this hopefully will be in positions of power within their organizations. So aside from stealing your training from your LinkedIn, how would you encourage leaders who are within those teams to encourage their teams to make accessibility a priority in their daily work? Well,
the first thing I'd say to any leader is get educated yourself. So actually take some form of skilling to get some knowledge on accessibility. Accessibility is not just something that will help you to be more inclusive, it will also drive innovation. And I think having both lenses is equally important. So understanding what it is and how to leverage and lean into it, I think, is important from the get-go. I think as I talk to leaders here, many leaders coming into the company or driving here, the first conversation I'll have to them is, do you know how accessible you are? And as I chat with customers, that's kind of one of the first conversations we'll have is, do you know where you're at? And the reality is most do not. It's very actually easy to find that out. There are free tools available to you. There are always people within your company, whether you realize it or not. So lean into your ERG, lean into the free tools, do a quick evaluation and see how accessible your website is. It's literally a 30-second check that anyone can do. Our tools are accessibilityinsights.io. So know where you're at to begin with. Then you can understand what the path and the journey is to get to accessible, and then create a plan. And the reality, I think, that we need to understand as leaders is if we don't do the work, then we are creating a work environment, a product, a building, a piece of code that will exclude 20% potentially of your customers or your employees. So, this is about inclusion at the end of the day, of a very large segment of the population. So I think it's a pragmatic conversation at this point. Know where you're at. No, it's not hard to do that assessment. I remove all barriers that you may have or stories you may have about, I don't know how to do that. Literally, it's a button, fast pass on a website, and you'll know exactly where you are. So just doing that quick process and then figuring out what the steps need to be, and leaning on the disability and accessibility community to help you on the journey.
I hope that team leaders have been taking notes through all of that. That deals a bit with what they can do and thinking a little bit about why they should do it. I was wondering if you could speak about your experience on how having an accessible workplace has helped to reveal the potential of your employees who might otherwise face obstacles at work.
Well, right. I mean, I think it's a continual journey. I think we are and will always be doing the work. Are we perfect? No. And I don't think any company can claim that. I do think that you have to continually have the right listening vehicles with your community, and the feedback that they give is the gold dust. And so I think the impact of what we have now is we have that flywheel. I have an empowered community that, trust me, they keep me grounded. They tell me when things are working, and they tell me when things are not. And it can be sometimes the small things. The power door isn't working, and it meant I couldn't get in the building, or I'm stuck in the building. And I mean, you just have to breathe these in. These are not small things. My care assistant didn't show up. I'm not able to do 1, 2, 3 today. You've got to continually be listening to the environment, or you just launched that product and it didn't work for my assistive technology. Pull that feedback in, remove all barriers to receiving that feedback, and then act on that feedback. And so I would say here, some days I feel like we've got it and that flywheel is spinning as fast as I think it should. Some days, yeah, I have to sit there and go, okay, we've learned a hot thing. Let's prioritize it. Let's be very thoughtful and methodical in what we do and how we move forward. And let's get the right things around it so that we can address. So yes, I would never claim success, if that makes sense. That's not my, what I hope we have accomplished here is a flywheel that includes insights from employees and customers. And customers, by the way, I get about 13,000 calls a month from disabled customers. We have a dedicated team called DAD, Disability Answer Desk. We receive those calls that can often be from people who are new to accessibility. They have acquired a disability through accident, injury, or diagnosis, and they're trying to figure out what they need, or they've got a problem, or they're trying to manage how do I plug this together? We get a lot of that feedback. So I get gold dust from everywhere. And I think gold dust is how we move forward.
Certainly haven't succeeded end of the line, but under your leadership, Microsoft is doing some really good work, and I think Michael might have some questions about the work that Microsoft is doing in this space.
Yeah, it was really, it ties in with something you mentioned earlier on around kind of recruitment programs, hiring programs, and also you've just been speaking about kind of feedback from customers and how you utilize that feedback. And I just wondered if you could give some insight into how, I suppose, Microsoft has gone about, I suppose, becoming a leader in relation to accessibility in both products for customers, but also for employees as an employer, and how those two aspects have interacted.
Well, I think Microsoft, as a technical provider, we produce technology, clearly Windows, Office, Xbox, AI. We are in work, life, and play. So there's an obligation for us to be involved in accessibility. And when I look back in history, we've been involved since the 90s. We're also a global employer. We have 230,000 plus employees around the world. And I think the other thing is that we really do deeply understand our role in not just being a role model employer, but also being a member of society and helping to move and tackle barriers that may exist for fundamental rights. So I do think it's incumbent on us. I think it's incumbent, candidly, on every company to really look at this. Their position may be slightly different. We know the importance of technology for people with disabilities. We know the importance of technology for the workplace. I mean, if you go back to Bill Gates, it was a PC on every desktop. Now we're looking at really a technology revolution, which we are in the thick of right now with AI. There is a burden of responsibility for sure that we feel. But I do think that if you're in pharmaceuticals, or if you're in a legal firm, or you're producing a manufacturing product, there's also a similar need. The pivot may be different. So yes, I think we do definitely feel it. And that's caused us over the years. Our ERG started, well, I started the ERG for Microsoft 17, 18 years ago now. There were groups that go back to the 90s, but we came together as one disability ERG. I've been here 20 years, so it's not far off that now. And we continually learn from that ERG. So that community, never forget your power, I would say. You are the ones at the forefront, at the tip of the spear. You know where things are working or not. I think when I know I've got it right is when that feedback is jumping off the page. And when I know I've got it wrong is when people are fearful to give that feedback.
Yeah, makes sense. I think, Louise, you had a couple of questions, I think, just in terms of future, I suppose, and kind of where this is all going to progress to.
Yes, we've got about 10 minutes left, and we'd like to spend that time talking to you about the future and your perspective on it. And with the population of people who identify as having a disability expected to grow in the future, what do you think is the future for accessibility initiatives?
Well, I think if you look at the goals of accessibility, a lot of my goals are to reduce barriers. So making it quicker, easier, discoverable, so easy to find, affordable, and available on and offline. So connectivity is very important to accessibility. We're sort of interconnected with connectivity. Now, there's also, how can we educate, skill, reduce social stigma, grow psychological safety? There's also a lot of people priorities, which will be an ongoing push. But I think from the future of accessibility as a discipline, again, what do we do to fix stairs, to fix 4% of the world's websites? We have to be principled in how we go forward. I do think that if I look at the future, there are some profound technologies on the radar that could have a very positive impact on accessibility and could cause some harms. So balancing that pendulum of harms and benefits. AI is the biggest. And so that's one where I can see already the potential benefits of AI. Captions right now in this product are generated by AI, transcripts being generated. For a deaf person, I can now get captions, transcript, and I can get meeting notes. I always have a pen by my, because I'm used to constantly looking up, looking down, looking up, looking down. I don't have to do that anymore because AI has solved it. I can rely on the technology to do the work. Again, neurodiversity, we're seeing that impact. In the blind community, we're seeing that impact because you can take a picture, you can now even take a video, and AI will describe it at an incredible level of depth. 4 paragraphs for a picture. Very profound. So huge benefits. But I also have to work on the harms. One of the harms with AI is that those libraries of books are all based on what exists in society. And society's got some rotten eggs in it. So how do we make sure that we've labeled the books right, that we've added books to the shelves, and that we've got images of canes, guide dogs, hearing aids like mine. We have disabled objects in those libraries that are correctly labeled. It understands what little people are that wear Gucci. It doesn't pull up the wrong images. When you type, hey, can you show me a blind person in the workplace? And it just brings up images of people wearing obscene masks. So there's work to be done to mitigate that. We're actually very invested in the libraries so that we can get these profound impacts coming out. But I get very excited about the possibility that AI is becoming smart enough to be able to understand a website. So you think about some of the fundamental challenges of our time, being able to, all of our information being in the digital world. AI could help us to understand the digital world and not have to rely on developers doing what they need to do. It could help build code right in the right way. So I'm not building stairs, I'm building ramps within our digital world. Or it could help us to use a simple camera on a phone and read a website out loud. So yeah, I get very excited about the future and then mildly terrified about all the work we've got to do.
I'm sure you're not alone on that. If we spoke a bit about how no one's really doing enough, especially when we're looking at organizations and employers, but if you had some employers who said that they were doing the standard accessibility measures, they were reaching that compliant bar, they were maybe doing a little bit extra. If there was one thing that you think is the next step that will become commonplace that employers should be doing that they're not doing now, what do you think the next step is on accessibility or disability inclusion for employers?
You really are asking the easy questions here, aren't you? Like, what is the one thing? My goodness. You know, one, celebrate the journey. Be patient with the journey. It does take time, and celebrate every single step that you take. It is very important. So for folks that have gone to that point of you're taking the right assessments, understanding your inventory, understanding what you need to do, yes, you keep going. I think the most important thing to do, you know, again, I'm a very sort of operational thought leader. So create your plan, have a plan. I celebrate when we have things, a roadmap written down, and we have a timeline against it. And I got leaders lined up to support it. So have a plan. I think and don't worry about that plan, right? This is a very treated as the black and white enterprise and discipline that it is. I think the other thing is continue to build. Remember to not just push forward in building your ramps and but also remember to put as much effort into your people and growing psychological safety. And and continuing to grow the talent pipeline that you have. So focus on your hiring programs would be my other, and your known understanding of representation. Sorry, you didn't get one.
No, the more than one is more helpful. We're running a bit short on time. Michael, did you have any final questions that you wanted to ask Jenny while we have her?
I might ask one more, which is also a one thing question. Just in relation to, I guess, more widely, so moving beyond employers, just looking at kind of, I suppose, the general public, and what is the one key takeaway that either those listening to this session or the general public more widely should, I suppose, take away in relation to accessibility and disability inclusion?
Well, firstly, I would say thank you for listening. Thank you for investing your time. Thank you for spending an hour wallowing in what I believe, I'm biased, but I believe that this is one of the most important and crucial topics that we have, is how do we drive inclusion in society, of a space that is far bigger than people realize. You know, this is almost 70 million Americans. Again, 1.3 billion is the current estimate of disability around the world. So I would really just make sure to smell the roses, be grateful for, I'm just grateful for everyone who wants to lean in here. You cannot get enough people to join this party. And then I'd say, what are you going to do? As maybe a push here, create yourself an action today, something that you're going to do in the new year after some eggnog, to help drive this effort forward. We need action. And so thank you for taking that next step, and thank you for, again, spending your, what is it, Tuesday lunch, evening, morning, wallowing in really just a fundamental right.
Thank you very much. Louise, I think we'll probably have to stop it there, I think, given the timing stuff. Jenny, Mary, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today. It's been fantastic to hear from you. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'll also echo your thanks, Jenny, to everybody who's joined today, and say thank you very much for joining and for listening and taking the time out of your day to kind of listen to us. And yeah, thank you very much to everybody. I hope you all have a good rest of day, however much rest of day you have left.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.